Hey guys, Tammy here, and in this video, I'm going to talk about 3 signs that you are being alienated. Now, parental alienation is a very controversial term. Courts really don't like it when you come in and use that term. It's kind of like the narcissism thing. It's in a way like they don't care about the term specifically. They want to know patterns of behavior. And the reason for that is because when you come in and you say, oh, they're parental alienating me, you are telling the court what the problem is. And the court's like, no, tell me what's going on and I will decide what the problem is. Okay. So there's a little bit of a distinction there that's important to understand. Now, before I dive into this deeper, let me just remind you, if you like this content, don't forget to hit like on the video. If you're one of the 70% that have not yet subscribed to the channel, please make sure that you do so that you're notified as new videos are released. And as always, please feel free to share this on social media. When we come in and we are saying that the other parent, or we're accusing them of parental alienation, I think one of the things that the court looks at that is really a distinction is, are you actually being alienated or is it attempted alienation? And you might say, well, what's the difference? It goes back to how I always talk about, well, being afraid something's going to happen in the court and it actually happening, right? So I can say, I'm afraid this person is going to beat my child, but unfortunately, if there's no sign of that, it hasn't actually occurred, you probably can't do anything about it, right? It's like when child welfare comes and there hasn't really been anything happen, you're just afraid of it. And you kind of know intuitively based on your history with this person, but it's really hard to get any leverage on anything until it actually happens, which again, I always say, I know as a parent, that's difficult to hear. But in the case of parental alienation, it's like a lot of times people are afraid that they're going to be alienated because they see that other parent attempting to alienate them. But I honestly find in the vast majority of cases that you cannot be alienated if you have a warm, involved relationship with the child. Now, I'm not saying it can't happen in that case. It does sometimes. I mean, I get it. You don't need to give me 5,000 comments on the video or anything, but I get that it does happen sometimes. But I'm just saying, in the vast majority of circumstances, it's really difficult to alienate a parent that's actually involved with a child and actually has a warm relationship and engages with the child and, is part of the child's life and all that kind of thing. Very, very hard to alienate that type of parent because a child has their own brain and they can understand, oh, this person's saying this about parent A, but then when I come over here and I'm with parent A, well, what parent B is saying about parent A doesn't match up. Like kids start to have that ability to discern in that way. Okay. I'm going to talk about 3 signs of alienation, but I want you to understand that these are really can be that they're attempting signs that they're attempting to alienate you, right? It doesn't mean they're going to succeed. And like everything else in this, sometimes our own anxiety and our own trauma feeds this and it ends up succeeding because of our reaction. Because if a child is coming and they're, saying and doing things that lead you to believe that the other parent is trying to alienate them, and then you get responsive or you get hysterical or you yell or you scream or you latch on tighter or you do all these things, you're actually going to probably push the child away and make it more likely that the other parent's able to alienate them. So it almost becomes like this self-fulfilling prophecy. So you have to be really careful, again, to maintain your steadiness and not let these types of things get the better of you just because the other parent's behavior scares you. Sometimes they're attempting alienation. That doesn't mean they're going to succeed at alienation. All right. So number 1, the child is hostile towards you. Okay. I think we see a lot of anger and all of that. And I saw something interesting a few weeks ago on Facebook I think it was from a therapist. And she said, imagine the child going into the other parent's world and you're talked about or said mean things about, and the child doesn't defend you, doesn't say anything, goes along to get along. Well, they're going to come back and they probably are going to be really angry. They're holding a lot of guilt. They're holding a lot of issues that are hard for them to navigate. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're angry with you. I actually find that the parent they're willing to be angry with, or throw a tantrum with or have a fit or whatever it is actually usually the parent that that child finds to be the emotionally safe parent. They feel free to let that out with you. They don't feel free to let it out with the other parent. This can also be challenging when you have a teenager, because I find that teenagers sometimes are just hostile because they're teenagers, right? It's really tough. Or like a 3-year-old. I'm going, I'm watching my kids go through this right now with my 3-year-old grandson. 3's a tough age. He's a strong-willed child. It's got a lot of challenges. It tries your patience. Sometimes I think we fear that the other parent is doing something or causing something or whatever when the child's little and can't communicate. And when they're older and they're obviously outward hostile, our fear is that we're going to become alienated because that child just seems to be so angry all the time. But again, the parent could be attempting it. It doesn't mean they're going to succeed. And I will tell you what the number one thing is that you can do to help your child. Okay, at the end of the video, I will share that. Number 2, the child mirrors the alienator's perspective of you. So I think I shared this a couple of videos ago. One of the things that my son used to say to me is, "Oh, you're a control freak." And that's something that his dad said all the time. And the children really didn't want to go with dad as much, mostly because dad just didn't set up his world to accommodate them. I lived in the family home. I had all their things. He moved out. He had a large house, but he didn't set it up to like have their own specific things and their rooms and TVs and video games and whatever the things were they had at home. He didn't mirror that world, which is what he should have done, because he knows what that looks like because he lived in it with me. So he knew. I think that's one of the key things we did with my late husband Thomas's children is we had everything in this world, in our world. Mom's world didn't look exactly alike, but we had all of the things here. They had a room, they had a setup and all of that stuff. But when the child comes back and their verbiage matches your ex's verbiage, and it's like, oh, wow, I almost hear my ex's voice, that can be triggering for us, right? That can put you right back into the PTSD of the toxic relationship, and it puts you in that fear mode. And what happens when we're in fear mode? We react. And so we start thinking, oh my gosh, they're being alienated. I need to do something. I need to call this person or that person, or have my attorney fix this, or find an expert, or do all these things because we're operating from that fear basis. And again, honestly, if you over time prove over and over again that that's not who you are just through your day-to-day actions, the kids start to recognize that you're the reliable parent. You're the one that's there. You're the one that they can count on. Number 3 is when the child gets to the point where they're refusing to see you, or they're refusing to come for as much time as they're ordered to, they refuse to comply with the parenting plan and all of that, I would say that's the point at which you've reached, yeah, you're actually alienated. Like if you've got a kid that won't see you, and it's not because of anything you did or your relationship with them, then yeah, you're probably the product of alienation. But that doesn't happen overnight, okay? It takes time and conditioning from the other parent. And so you going in and saying, oh, I'm alienated, when the child's being kind of conditioned, the child being conditioned, unfortunately, isn't really something the court can necessarily pin or recognize. I mean, they can say don't speak poorly and all that kind of stuff, but on a day-to-day basis, it's harder for them to control that type of behavior. And so the number one thing that you can do in this instance is get your child into therapy. And I know a lot of times when we're dealing with a narcissistic person, they won't want the child in therapy. If you really think you're being alienated, the very first step I would take is to request if the other parent won't agree, I would request an order that the child be put in therapy. That'd be the number one thing I would do. I know that's easier in some states than others. California tends to be a state where it's like therapy, sure, therapy for everybody. That's a real easy order to get most of the time in California. But I know that's not necessarily true, especially as the children get older. I think it becomes a little bit harder because they have more autonomy. They're being given more and more autonomy here as laws and things are changing. So it can be challenging in that instance. And sometimes if they're old enough, 16, 17, you just have to wait it out and wait for them to recognize. My older son in particular used to take up for his dad and defend him a lot and all those kind of things. And, now I think he sees it a little more realistically. he realizes I'm not perfect, his dad's not perfect, and we both have flaws and whatever. But I think that when push comes to shove, he knows that I'm the parent that if you need something and it's 2 a.m. and you're 1,000 miles away, then I'm gonna tear out somebody's eyeballs if I have to get to you. I will move heaven and earth to do whatever I need to do. And my kids have learned that that's the parent that I am. I am the one that's here for them, despite all the negative comments and things that my ex put into their head when they were young children. So if you're dealing with these kinds of issues, you don't really know how bad is it? Am I to the point where I need to actually do something? Not, what kind of techniques can I use? Then I would encourage you to go over to divorceuniversityonline.com/VIP-coaching. There's information on that page where you can learn about my coaching services, figure out which one would be the best fit for you, and learn how to enroll in the services. All right. So I will see you guys next time. Thanks so much.
We'll grow in number, fueled by them to see the horizon, turn us to thousands.